Welcome to the Apex One News Magazine. Tonight, President Trump retracts after appearing as though he conceded to Joe Biden's victory. While giving the General Services Administration the go-ahead with the transition process, Trump holds on to his fight against what he describes as fraudulent elections. So, what happens from here? Roderick Numia provides a reading of the current stalemate and conjectures the scenario where the president stays on his point. Will the Joe Biden administration be good news for black businesses? As African Americans ponder on this, the president-elect starts paving the way by appointing people who are known to contribute to racial equality to his cabinet. Tonight, we assess the move. And in sports, the world's football family continues to mourn the passing away of Diego Maradona, who quits the green turf forever. The soccer icon, said to be the greatest in the world, passed on early this week. But as we hear in this edition of the Apex One News Magazine, Maradona's legacy lives on. But first, the editorial.
Thank you, Ernest. One of the first tasks undertaken by any newly elected president is to consider his or her appointments for the new administration's cabinet. And that's no different for President-elect Joe Biden. Looking back at the Democratic challenger's campaign, it's no secret that Biden's campaign was fraught with questions regarding his political record on the African American community. Throughout his campaign, and through the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, many accused Biden of building his career on the betrayal of Black voters. His record clearly shows, for example, that he was the leading liberal opponent to busing in the 1970s, and in the 1980s and 90s was one of the leading architects of mass incarceration. Yet, to his credit, since his triumph in the presidential election, Biden has already earned praise from progressives for tapping a selection of systemic racism experts and academics to fill economic positions on his transition team. With an apparent focus on bridging the racial wealth gap between Black and white Americans in the country, the new hires are reportedly working to help shape his policies on small business lending, housing, and health. The racial wealth gap is a key indicator in the overbearing presence and persistence of institutional racism in America. The average Black family holds only 13% of the wealth of the average white family. According to the Federal Reserve, in 2019, Black families owned a median wealth of $24,000 compared to the median wealth of $188,000 owned by white families. And with more and more data documenting the aggravated impact on Black businesses resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic this year, it seems this disparity is set to increase. Leading President-elect Biden's transitional economic team is Mirza Baradaran, author of the book The Color of Money, which many tout as the leading resource on race-based economic disparities in the country. Baradaran is an outspoken proponent of slavery reparations. In her book, she argues that closing the racial wealth gap begins with acknowledging past wrongs and providing compensation for damages, both as a means of closing the wealth gap and correcting white supremacy. She was also a consultant on this issue for several other Democratic candidates in the 2020 elections, including Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Some of the other members of Biden's landing team that have prompted approval and excitement from progressives include Don Graves, who previously worked for the Obama administration and was the head of corporate responsibility for Key Bank, and Tanae Dolphin, the former chief of staff at the U.S. Department of Commerce and the first executive director for the Greater Washington Black Chamber of Commerce. It was the hope of many on the left that these picks signaled the Biden administration's commitment to addressing systemic racism in the country by acknowledging that racism has been embedded into policy and taking the necessary measures to enforce parity. That is, until earlier this week, when it was reported that former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel was under consideration for a cabinet post. In 2016, reports showed that the two-term mayor had played an active and willful role in the cover-up of Laquan McDonald's murder at the hands of Chicago police in 2014. Laquan McDonald, a 17-year-old boy, was shot in the back 16 times while walking away from police. And in 2017, police body cam footage was publicly released and clearly showed that McDonald had posed no immediate threat to the police. In a city still grappling with generations of systemic racism and police brutality, the public outrage effectively ended Emanuel's political career in Chicago. In light of this legacy, it comes as no surprise that progressives are outraged by Biden's apparent pivot from his commitments to the African American community, and has left many wondering if Biden's administration will, in fact, reflect the policies and values championed by his transitional team, or if Black voters, who are credited with his presidential win, must ready themselves for yet another Biden betrayal. Reporting
Marjorie Hemrich.
Thank you.
This is the Apex One Radio News Magazine. And this week, the General Services Administration, that is in charge of preparing a president-elect for office, informed Joe Biden that the Trump administration is ready to begin the formal transition process. When its administrator, Emily Murphy, sent a letter to that effect, Americans quickly heard that President Trump had finally conceded. This was also because Trump said in a tweet that he was letting the process go on for the sake of the country. Shortly afterwards, the president reaffirmed his position that the election was fraudulent. And since then, he has shown no signs of letting that go. Now, political analyst Roderick Newman now joins us to explain this twist of things. Roderick, good evening and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Kanjo. Good evening to you and good evening to our listeners.
Right. So, Roderick, as we speak, is the president-elect Joe Biden and his team working with the General Services Administration?
Yes, they are. As of earlier this week, the president decided to give a go-ahead to the director of the GSA to authorize the official transition to begin between the two teams right now. So the president's team and the team of the president-elect are currently meeting, and the most important topic right now they are discussing is the coronavirus, the vaccine, and vaccine distribution.
Right. So were Americans quick to conclude that Trump had conceded when in effect he had to come back to his stance?
Yes, Trump has said he's given a go-ahead to the process for it to happen. He is authorizing the transition to happen, but in his playbook, that does not translate into concession because he's still fighting in court. Mm-hmm. But what has become apparent is that Trump and his team has lost 33 of their election court battles. The latest one was today in the state of Pennsylvania, where a judge President Trump appointed to that court threw out the case by saying that there's just no evidence. It doesn't hold water. That's not something they can deliberate. And the president has not given up, and obviously his fervent followers and supporters have not given up either. Because if you talk to folks outside Washington, like here in Ohio, in Royal, Ohio, they firmly believe that President Trump won the election, and some mystery, some deep state, some election machine stole the election from the president, and they're still going to get to the bottom of it. There's still hope to a lot of Trump supporters that we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to find out what happened to this election. And
right. So can Trump's pursuit affect the work the GSA is currently doing with Joe Biden and team?
Yes, because he can tell his team not to share information with Joe Biden's team, and they are not going to share it. So right now it's kind of walking on eggshells because he's very temperamental. He makes extemporaneous decisions. So he can turn around and say, oh, there's evidence that there was fraud in this election, and so stop the transition process. And that will stop automatically. And that, in a way, delay or hinder the proper transition of power from one administration to another. Today in the White House, he was pressed by a couple of journalists in the White House pool, and they said, and he said he's the president and should be treated with respect, and he still has evidence that the Biden team or Joe Biden won this election by fraud. And he said something which caught my attention, because that is very that's very un-American. That's not the way Americans function, where he said Joe Biden has to prove that the 80 million votes he got were not fraud. And I thought that's against, if you think that there is fraud, you're supposed to prove it. He's not supposed to prove why he won the election. If you feel you, the president, current president, feel that you lost the election and there's evidence of fraud, you bring it. Biden has the 80 million people to prove that he won the election and he didn't fraud. So that I watched the press conference to the end, and I thought that's against everything the American justice system stands for, where you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Joe Biden is already guilty in his eyes and has to prove that he's innocent.
Right. Now, if the GSA is currently working with Joe Biden and team, and Trump is still pursuing his fight, what happens ahead?
It's just going to slow the process further. Not a whole lot of things are going to happen that are supposed to happen as it is right now. As I said earlier, that just means that there's going to be delayed information to the Biden team. That just means that the Biden team is not going to be equipped to administrate after noon, January 20th. And this is not just ordinary times in America, it's hard times. The economy is not in the best shape. The health of the country is not in the best shape. America's foreign relation is not in the best shape. So at this time, any break or any delay or any hesitance in the transition process is very detrimental, because the country needs a solid administration right now. At this point in time, people like Putin, people like the president of North Korea are very excited, because this is the kind of America they want, a divided America, so they can thrive in what they want to do. But I think there's a member in the GOP telling this president that, hey, yes, you think that they may have won the election, but tradition is right now as it stands, if you don't have any evidence, because as I said earlier, 33 of his cases have been thrown out across different states, from Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and in Arizona. A couple of it got thrown out also in Georgia, because he was insisting that there was a voter fraud. And so it's a game we're going to wait to see. But one thing is for sure, you did ask me this the last time we had this news magazine, that is he going to leave office? He said today that, he will leave. but doesn't mean the fight is over. So he's still fighting.
Right. So even when he leaves and with this pursuit, will that affect Biden's legitimacy?
No, or it depends to who you're talking to. Firstly, most world leaders have called and congratulated Biden as president-elect. 80 million people recognize Biden as their president, but Biden has a tough task in front of him. Right. One, he has to deal with members of his own party, the progressive in his party who are way to the left. That's problem number one. But the second problem is that Biden has to deal with Congress. The luck he has is that the House of Representatives is currently majority Democrat. But after January, if the Democrat don't win the runoff election in Georgia, that means Mitch McConnell becomes head of the Senate. That's a stumbling block for him when it comes to liberal and progressive policies. So to majority of the electors, to majority of the Americans that went to the poll and voted on election day, Biden is a legitimate president to them. But to the 73 million plus people that voted for the incumbent president, they're going to, for the next 4 years, see Biden like the guy that stole the elections from them.
Right. Just before you go away, this is America, and we understand that every leader in this country has the country at heart. So are you seeing the possibility of Biden and Trump shaking hands at the end of the day?
Yes, if Trump offers it. Biden was asked the other day by a bunch of reporters, like, will you meet with the president? And Biden yelled back to them and said, if he asks. So there's a probability Biden is the guy that wants to bridge all the divide that has happened in the country. So if President Trump was gonna offer to meet with him and shake hands, he would accept it. He's not gonna refuse it and say, no, you didn't concede when I won the election. He's gonna accept and meet with President Trump, because that's the image of America that Biden wants Americans and the entire world to see.
Roderick Numia is a political analyst. Roderick, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you, Ernest.
Bye. This is the Apex One Radio News magazine. Ohio will get the first batch of the COVID-19 vaccine by mid-December. The announcement was made by Governor Mike DeWine earlier this week during his routine briefing. The governor revealed that the first batch would be vaccine developed by Pfizer. Ohio is expected to receive 30,000 doses for the first batch. Healthcare workers will be amongst the first set of people to take the vaccine, according to Mr. DeWine. Also, people who have come in contact with COVID-19 patients, either in nursing homes, hospitals, or outside, will be prioritized. So far, Ohio has had over 383,000 cases and a total of 6,274 deaths. Apex One Radio News Magazine. Now, it is easy to forget that Ohio was in the grips of an opioid crisis before COVID-19. To the state's public health officials and the non-profit organizations, drug addiction and mental health awareness is still important to address. It is against this backdrop that some Columbus-based health facilities and non-profit making organizations organized a session recently to educate the public on the use and importance of the Narcan nasal spray, an essential tool for first responders in treating overdose. Our reporter Jesse Pryzak was at the event and now reports.
Thank you, Ernest, and hello, audience. On November 3rd, the voters approved Issue 24, granting the rights to increase funds addressing mental health, alcohol, and drug addiction programs. I attended Project Dawn, the Narcan pop-up event located at Kroger's in Hilliard, Ohio on Cemetery Road on November 21st, 2020, between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. A collaboration of several different agencies in partner with Project Dawn and the Ohio State Wexner Medical Center have come together to help educate the public about the use of the Narcan nasal spray. The Narcan nasal spray is the first response to administer to someone with drug overdose symptoms and to keep them alive until emergency assistance arrives. Drug overdose symptoms can include very low body temperature, passing out, or an unresponsive loss of consciousness, skin color of a pale or bluish tint, abnormal breathing, fast, slowed, or irregular pulse. I was given the opportunity to speak with Mr. Vincent Darling from Franklin County Public Health and his colleagues from the Ohio State Wexner, who explained how to use the Narcan nasal spray. The steps to administer is to tilt the head back of the person in need and spray half of the Narcan spray up one side of the nose and half up the other side of the nose. If there is no breathing or breathing continues to be shallow, continue to perform the CPR on the chest for them while waiting for the Narcan to take effect and emergency assistance arrives. Statistics show, according to drugabuse.gov, that the use of having the Narcan nasal spray on hand has made a positive impact on saving someone's life versus not having it. A large scale on a national study showed that opioid overdose deaths have decreased by 14% in states after they've enacted the Narcan access laws since 2019. Reporting live for Apex One News Magazine, this is Jesse Pryzak.
Jesse Pryzak, thank you so much. This is the Apex One Radio News Magazine. In a bid to promote social development in Central Ohio, civil society organizations have been doubling their efforts in providing for vulnerable populations. Some of these organizations have volunteered to address top issues, including food insecurities. One of such nonprofit outfits is the Starfish Assignment, created in 2018. The organization matches those in need with volunteers who can donate to kids, families, and the homeless. Nicole Banks is the founder of the Starfish Assignment organization, which collaborates with Columbus Police. She is joining me on the show together with Police Officer Pete Carsusio, and both people will be explaining more about just how they collaborate and work to serve these vulnerable populations. Nicole and Pete, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Right. So I'll begin with Nicole. What motivated you to create the Starfish assignment?
In July 2018, my then 11-year-old son and I came upon a homeless Vietnam veteran who, in a parking lot very close to our home, he needed help, and we gathered together about 300 people who donated ultimately $10,000 within just a couple of weeks. We came together from all different walks of life, different political backgrounds, for one common goal, which was to help this 74-year-old man get back on his feet. And we did so very quickly. And after it was over, we wanted to keep doing that and keep helping people. But it obviously isn't safe to go around in grocery store parking lots just plucking people out and helping them. So what we did is I decided that maybe we could partner with police officers, because police officers are all across the city. They see people on the worst days of their lives, and maybe they would be able to work with us to help people. And that's exactly what we did. And fortunately, Columbus Division of Police was very willing to work with us. So that's what Starfish does. We are non-political. We don't, we just work with only police officers can refer people to us for help. And so police officers will go to a scene, they're doing their job, and then they determine that somebody needs a little bit more help, and then they come to us and say, hey, we have this family who needs some help, and Officer Casuccio can speak to that part of it.
Now, Pete, tell me, how did you receive Nicole when she approached you with this project, and just why did the police get involved in it?
Nicole and I came into contact after I hosted an event in the fall of 2018, which would have been the first Cops and Barbers event that was done between myself and my close friend and my barber, Robert Kaysen. We decided to enter into a collaborative effort together after meeting, because officers oftentimes, as Nicole had said, see people on the worst days of their lives. We also have a long, rich tradition in altruistic behavior. The problem that most people don't realize is that police officers also, when they clock out for the day, are husbands and wives and mothers and fathers and grandparents, and have other obligations. So sometimes we see that we would like to give back to the community, but due to personal restraints, we don't have that. So Nicole pairs law enforcement when we see a family in need with her sphere of influence, whether it be through donations or corporate sponsorship, and then we're able to bring that full circle to provide those resources and help to those families.
Nicole, there are thousands of families in Central Ohio, thousands of homeless people as well. So who gets the Starfish support, and how do you sample the beneficiaries for every outreach program you conduct?
Right. So that's a challenge. And actually that was hard for me when we were helping Jim, because I knew that there were so many other homeless people, even homeless Vietnam vets out there, and we were only helping one. But that's what we do with Starfish, is that we recognize that we might not be able to change the entire world, but we'll be able to help out just this individual or just this family or just this neighborhood. So we work with the people that the officers bring to us, and we help them, and we know that we can make a difference for them. And we may not be able to change the entire world or the entire city or anything, but we can make a difference for these people, and that's what we try to focus on.
Officer Pete, tell me what the experience has been working with the Starfish assignment this far. Would you say it's been successful?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So like any other organization, the more publicity, I guess, for lack of better terminology, you have, increases your sphere of influence. Thus far, at Starfish, we focus on two different types of assignments. You have macro assignments, which are the large-scale Cops and Gobblers, Cops and Barbers. We have a literacy program, which is books and badges that pairs officers up with school-age children. All of them provided with a copy of a book, and the officer reads it to them. So it's great. It's a great opportunity. Then we have macro assignments, which are the small real time. Hey, you have that single mother of 4. She works 2 jobs. She needs a kitchen table. So every event that we do, much like, interviews, given the opportunity to come on your show, widens our sphere of influence. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people want to engage in the community. Either they don't feel safe, or they don't know how, or they're afraid of getting taken advantage of. So this is a very easy organization for them to either donate resources or time to. So yeah, it's been, I guess, for lack of better terminology, a smashing success.
Right. Nicole, could you mention some of the landmark assignments you've had this far?
So actually, we just worked with you just a couple weeks ago, with your organization a couple weeks ago. We did Cops and Gobblers, Pete mentioned, where we gave away 150 turkey dinners to every resident of Rosewind Apartments, which is a neighborhood in South Linden that's been extremely hard hit by violence this year. That was phenomenally fun and successful, and really a great opportunity for us. Pete also mentioned our Books and Badges program, where officers go in and read to elementary school age children. And that one's fantastic because the kids get a copy of the book that the officer read. It has a sticker in there that says, "This is a gift from your friends at Columbus Division of Police." And then, that one's so much fun. Oftentimes the kids will want the officers to autograph that book for them. They'll ask them questions about policing. They get to, what the number one question is that the police get asked is, do you actually like donuts? Because they want to know whether the cops actually eat donuts or not. They'll ask them, what's the fastest your car's ever gone? But they also ask them questions too, like, have you ever shot somebody? That's a great discussion and a great dialogue topic that we need to have in this day and age. We've also done Cops and Barbers, as we mentioned. Last year in 2019, we helped 1,000 kids get school supplies through Cops and Barbers. The girls made art supplies with art projects with female officers, and the boys got haircuts. Now this year we had to scale it way back because of the pandemic, but we still had it. We do a lot of really fun stuff.
Right. Now, Officer Pete, has this social program helped to consolidate, if not improve, on the relationship between the police and the population?
So that's an interesting question. It's a very complicated question. But believe it or not, in inner city neighborhoods, and I hate using that term, officers have a great relationship with the people in those communities. We are a necessary service for them, and most of the officers who work in those neighborhoods know that they're providing a necessary service for those residents. The other part of that is, like we said a couple times already, we usually come in contact with people on their worst day. We carry that with us. You have to be somebody, to be an effective law enforcement officer, you have to be somebody who cares. You do, right? You genuinely have to want to give back. So this projects like Cops and Barbers, Books and Badges, the Cops and Gobblers event that we just did, gives us the opportunity to give back more than what we do on just a routine patrol. This is actually coming into your home, and telling you everything that you're reading and seeing. Don't believe all of that. Kind of look at the person who's standing in front of you and make your decision from there.
Right.
So yeah, it's building inroads.
Nicole, tell me briefly, what have been some of the hurdles you face this, especially in the midst of COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19, it's hard because we have a lot of people that want to get involved in the organization, and we can't have big events with volunteers. Mm-hmm. We have, it's hard because we want to have a lot of events and get involved with the community, and the officers want to do that also. But, the schools they're not open, so we have to adapt. Fortunately, CPD has been really great in that terms. Like when we shut down, when the school shut down initially back in March, and we weren't doing Books and Badges anymore in the classrooms, we worked with them to come up with a way to do Books and Badges online. And we reached 250,000 people online by had officers go on and read books online. Over 250,000 people. Can you imagine? So CPD has been really great about that, but that's been really hard, trying to figure out the ways that we can adapt our programs to work in that environment. But we've done it. Right now, we have a coat drive. AEP Ohio has donated $10,000 to us to get coats to kids. And normally the way that we do that is the community liaison officers will go into schools and say, tell me, teachers and principals and counselors, who do you know are the kids that don't have coats? Well, the kids aren't in school, so they don't know who are the ones who don't have coats. So we're going to work with the community rec centers to find out who are the kids that don't have coats.
Right.
So we have to adapt.
Beautiful. Officer Pete, just to run off, is this a kind of collaboration you would love to keep?
As far collaboration, as far as what do you mean?
Like the collaboration with Starfish, is this something you would love to consolidate?
Yeah, we're actually probably going to start expanding into smaller law enforcement agencies within inside Franklin County. You know, you take a project like Books and Badges, for example. I would anticipate that being probably nationwide within 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
So I 100% think that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Nicole, when is your next outing?
So our next thing will be Shop with a Cop. We're working on that. It'll be held at Walmart in a couple of weeks. And then, as I mentioned, our AEP Ohio Coat Drive will be coming up also. And then we're going to do another Christmas bag giveaway probably on the west side. So with food and gift cards for people in need.
Nicole Banks is the founder of the Starfish Assignment, and she works in collaboration with the Columbus Police, represented in this newscast by Officer Pete Casioso. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
This is the Apex One Radio News Magazine. Back to politics. Erica Crowley is the Democratic State Representative for the 26th District of the Ohio House of Representatives. First to the House, first appointed or elected to the House in November of 2018. She got re-elected this year. Now, Representative Crowley has spoken openly about the obstacles and hardships she's had to overcome in her life and cites them as a key motivation to her bid for political office and her work for the constituency or the constituent of District 26. The representative now joins us on the Apex One Radio News Magazine. Erica, welcome to the show. You just have to mute yourself.
Hey, thank you for having me.
How are you today, Erica?
I'm well, and yourself?
I'm great. Now, first question, what was your immediate reaction when you were re-elected to the House this year?
My reaction, honored to be able to serve again, even though I did not have a Republican opponent this time. I don't assume that people will go down the ballot and just, elect me or vote for me. And so seeing the numbers as they came out, I felt very honored and privileged that people still felt a need to hit that box with my name and not just skipping over it.
Right. So quickly and briefly, could you trace your roots? Are you hailing from District 26, where you are state rep?
No, sir. So I am originally from Northeast Ohio, born and raised in Youngstown. I always say that because I don't forget where I come from, and I want to acknowledge the good things about Youngstown. We hear all the time the bad things with the crime and the drugs, but there are people who make it out just like me, who are, trying to do well in life. And so I came here for law school. I traveled around a bit, served in the Navy down in Virginia, lived in Atlanta, and I came here in 2014 for law school, and decided that this is a place that I wanted to stay and raise my children. And I wanted to get more involved in the community, because while I was in law school, I continued to give back. I continued to be in the community, whether it was with the VITA program, doing taxes for people who really couldn't afford to pay for their taxes to be prepared. I volunteered with the Legal Aid Society, the Brief Advice Clinic, and had also served the homeless, meals and things of that nature. And so was very familiar with some of the issues and concerns that my now neighbors in the 26th district had.
Right. So expectation of holding political office is different from the reality on the ground. You've been in office before. What has been a breakdown in bipartisan leadership on the local level as we've seen at the national level?
So I get asked that question all the time, and it's a good question because what you see on the TV all the time or social media is like the federal and the congressional level. And there is a lot of infighting, or right now, because the Democrats hold a majority in the House, they will pass bills and then you see it go over to the Senate. And we say bills go over to the Senate to die because they just sit on the desk of Mitch McConnell. Well, in the State House, there is some of that, but not to the extent. So when I got elected in 2018, I was in one of the largest classes of freshmen that had been elected in a while. And so Democrat and Republican. And so what we did was we had a conversation amongst ourselves that we didn't want to be gridlocked. We didn't want that reputation of not being able to work together and work across the aisle. And I will say, I know that Larry Householder has received a lot of criticism because of, the bribery scheme, which was a surprise to a lot of us, especially freshmen who had not served with him before. But what I can say is that, he was willing to work in a more bipartisan manner than some of the other people that I currently serve with. My first piece of legislation that I got signed into law was with another Republican, and Speaker Householder at the time was the one who asked me if I would be willing to be on that piece of legislation with a Republican because of my military background, and he did not have to do that. And I spoke with my minority leader about it, and she thought it was, a good thing to do, and it passed.
Many races in 2020 elections were incredibly difficult and contentious, given that both Democrats and Republican voters were very emotionally invested in the outcome. How did this, or how did you navigate your own campaign? And was it vastly different from when you ran for the first time?
That's a great question. So it was vastly different because I didn't have anyone in the primary and I didn't have anyone in the general that I was running against. So I didn't have to necessarily campaign as hard for myself, but I did really have to campaign hard and really had to support my colleagues who were running in very competitive districts. And I think it was very intense. And I would say that people were emotionally invested because of the current climate that we see going on with social justice issues, racism as a public health crisis. And we saw a lot of stuff that was coming from the White House with this law and order. And people really wanted to understand, what does that mean for them? And what does that mean for their community? So there was a lot of not even really talking about the issues, but talking about who we are, where we stand on political issues, and not the policies that we have been working on or that were in place that might be positively or negatively impacting people.
Right. So tell us about your constituency and what is the major challenge faced by the people of this district, and is there anything you would want to do this time which you feel that you didn't do in your previous mandate?
So again, that's a great question. So I think the issues in my district are very unique to a lot of other people in Central Ohio. So I have the largest district with mostly Black and people of color. So my district is around 57% Black and people of color, which is the largest out of all of the districts here in Franklin County in Central Ohio. So we have some unique challenges. One is employment and workforce development. We have one of the lowest median incomes of Central Ohio. So that's an issue, making sure that, there was a lot of people in my district who reached out for unemployment and help with PUA, which it came from the federal government because they weren't getting, weren't able to navigate ODJFS to get payment. So employment is an issue. The other issue I would say is healthcare. And that's twofold. One, we see in this district, because of redlining over the years, that asthma is up, diabetes is up, and heart disease, high blood pressure is an issue. And so access to healthcare is at the forefront, making sure that we continue to have Medicaid or expand it even more for the people who have a need. But also my district has 5 of the zip codes that Celebrate One is focusing on as it comes to infant mortality. So that is another concern for this district, is really tackling maternal and infant mortality in a way that we are decreasing the rates among Black and brown babies. And then I would say the other is also small businesses and making sure that they have access to capital and that people who want to start a business can. We see even with COVID-19, when the Paycheck Protection Program started, less than 3% of Black and brown businesses received money from the federal government. And so small businesses are the driving force of this state. However, there's always an issue with access to capital and access to capital to sustain businesses for Black and brown people.
Erica Crowley is a legislator. She's just been re-elected to the House of Representatives, and she's representing Ohio District 26. Erica, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening.
Bye. This is the Apex One Radio News magazine. In culture news, some Kenyan female gospel musicians in Kenya and abroad have come together to work on a music project. The project, which resulted to a medley titled The Blessing, was officially released this evening during a virtual launching. The track is released under the banner of Kenya Women of Worth, known by its acronym as KWOW. Gospel artist Angela M. is the brain of the initiative, and she now joins us from Columbus to throw more light on it. Angela, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ernest. Thank you for having me.
Now, you just launched The Blessing some hours ago. Tell us, how did it go?
Oh my goodness, it went beyond anything I would have imagined when we started out. And I've never done something like that before, launching anything virtually, and it went really well, given that we planned it in 2 days or so, yeah.
Right. So The Blessing is supposed to be the title of a song, but again, it came as a whole project, bringing so many people together. Could you explain this project to us?
Yes, The Blessing is a song that I'm sure most people are familiar with, that came out around March of this year, done by Elevation Music, Karijobi, and Cody and the rest. And it has been such a blessing to many during this time of COVID and being in lockdowns and everything. And I felt that unction that I needed to do something with that song that would also, show that diversity that we have of different languages within the one song,
Right.
And when we set it out, I didn't know what it would take to make it happen, but it was quite an undertaking. And to see all these ladies so very well, they are talented and so busy in life, come together and do this project. That's what is now called KWOW. It didn't start that way, but by the end of the project, we had Kenyan Women of Worth as a group now, and we are amazed by what God is doing. And this song now has 10 tribes in it, 10 different languages from Kenya. And I know that people will be blessed to hear their language, the blessing in their language. It takes another level when you hear something in another language.
Kenyan Women of Worth. Tell us about this group which you just created. Are you people going to focus only on music, or you're going to expand your scope and do other things?
That's a great question. We don't know where God will take us. We are available right now, and what we know is that we are going to support each other. When someone has a project, we will come together and support that one person. That is what the vision is at the moment. Just like we did with this project, they all came and rallied around me and did it. So we will do the same for the others.
Right. And tell us again about this track. I understand you worked in dispersed ranks, part of or members of the organization are spread across. There are some of them back in Kenya, others here in the United States, perhaps some may be in Europe. So how did you people work to produce this track, whereas you don't meet each other physically?
It's unreal. Thank God for technology. See how we are able to communicate right now, and we are not even in the same room. I remember the days I would come to the studio. Now we can do this, and it's amazing what technology is doing. Unbelievably, we all recorded with the phones. We had some people getting into the closets, small closets, to record with their phones, and it took many takes, but we finally got it, because someone would record and it sounded very good, but when it was put, the sound engineer would put it on the mixer, you would hear the noise,
right,
and we'd have to redo it again. So the whole entire project has really literally been done with phones, including the video,
right,
videos, and everyone. We never met. And today, during the launch, it was the first time that we all actually saw each other.
Right. So let us look at the long term and bring Kenya into perspective. Are you envisaging a time when this group will meet, maybe physically in Nairobi or Mombasa or any part of Kenya?
Or even here, right?
Perform.
We could even meet here too.
Okay.
That would be the ideal thing to do. I wish we can be able to meet and actually do a project now when we are all together in the same room.
Right.
I believe if we could do this, I believe it can get even better.
Where is this song available?
It's available on YouTube. Right now it's available on YouTube. It's also available on my website, angelagospelmusic.com. And YouTube is Angela M TV. And it's also on Spotify, iTunes, all Google Play, Amazon, all those digital platforms.
Angela M is a gospel music artist from Kenya, founder of KWOW, a group that brings together Kenyan Women of Worth, and they've just put out a track titled The Blessing. Angela, thank you so much for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. God bless you.
You're listening to the Apex One Radio News magazine. In foreign news, when talking about development models in the world, Rwanda, Malaysia, and Malta are always mentioned. These countries moved from poverty and under development status in the past few decades to examples of modern development. However, one of the most spectacular development stories is Botswana, often not too much in the news, but with amazing indexes, which experts use when crafting development studies models. In the paper that follows, Bahati Gandhi presents the Southern African development model and explains why Botswana changed rapidly in recent years. Bahati, mute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me?
Go right ahead.
Go right ahead. Oh, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for letting me inside and give me this opportunity for talking about the development of this country. That's true. Botswana is one of the countries which is developing in Southern African countries. And there's some reasons that are mentioned here. But before saying something, I would like to tell people around the world that Botswana is one of the country, or one of the southern countries, and this country is having almost 2.3 million people, and is a country which is located in a desert called Kalahari. So there are several reasons that are making Botswana to be a developing country, rapidly developing country. The first one is that the population themselves loves their country. This is the first point, this is the reason why making Botswana changing rapidly. And Botswana love one another, and they love their country very much. This helps them to stay communicated always and safe. For example, in terms of health, Botswana work hard to protect its population. Second, Botswana has mineral wealth. It's a country which is having diamonds. It's a country which is having many resources. So, except resources, is a country which is having a tourism areas like Okavango is the best in the world. I think it has put on the list of the best in the world. So that also can contribute in making Botswana to be a developed country. So I think it's third one is the third one, the good governance. This country is a country that has a good governance. So, and looking inside, the governance is very, very nice and is very controlled. Fourth one is the economic management. The economic management is well managed. The economy is well managed. I think that one, everyone knows, whether you are in Botswana or whether you are outside. Botswana is very nice according looking at its economy. So in short, mineral wealth, good governance, economic management, and being a country that is having small number of population, that make Botswana to be a rapid country, a developing country in Africa or around the world. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Bahati Gandhi there on Botswana, which is an economic and development model, not only in Africa but in the world. President Donald Trump has retracted after appearing as though he conceded to Joe Biden. Meantime, the GSA is currently working with President-elect Joe Biden for the transition process. In this edition of the news magazine, we heard from Roderick Numia, who analyzed the situation. Will Joe Biden be good news for black businesses? That question was answered in this edition of the Apex One News magazine. And we were told that his cabinet that will deal with economic issues has people who are racially impartial appointed to it.